Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And we're back with another Bob Dylan review. Today we're talking about Time Out of Mind. I believe this album is from 1997, so we're coming quite along. And this reunites Bob Dylan with Daniel Lanois, the producer behind what some view as a successful comeback album in 1989's Oh Mercy. Like Oh Mercy, I feel like this is a lot of individually well-done songs, but overall it has a sort of unified feel throughout the record, and it's a bit on the depressing side. I don't necessarily think that falls on Lanois. I think that this is just the kind of song that Bob Dylan was writing at this point in his career, and to be honest, not sure if I can think of a Bob Dylan song since Blood on the Tracks that was just filled with brightness and joy. There was something maybe about how his voice aged, along with his worldview, that just drove him more and more to sadness and cynicism. This album opens with one of its more famous songs. It's called Lovesick. And when you hear this one, again, you think of the bluesy stuff we've been hearing from Bob Dylan in the 90s. But unlike the covers we heard on the two previous albums, this isn't him just being a classic blues man. Rather, it's him sort of living through a bluesy lens. He's, letting out little bursts of emotions that don't always go together. One time he brings in the bright image of lovers in the meadow, even as he's singing in this gruff voice and just cynically saying that he's sick of love. In essence, this song has a kind of stream of conscious feel to it. And while it doesn't give it the brilliant catchiness of a Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, it does give the song a bit of vivacity. You hear it and you're like, this is not just Bob Dylan playing the blues. This is Bob Dylan expressing something. Track number 2, however, is called Dirt Road Blues, and this one is a pretty straight blues, but it's a nice, complete production, kind of reminiscent of the work Bob Dylan did with Don Was on Under the Red Sky. There's different guitar parts that aren't perfectly matching, but create a nice full sound, some nice glittery organ in the background, etc. Track number 3 is another potential classic. It's called Standing in the Doorway. Seems to be a ballad about lost love. And the lyrics here, they're very rich, and they try and invoke a somewhat different feeling in each verse. Perhaps they're even set in a different chronological moment, kind of like Bob Dylan did back with Tangled Up in Blue. And considering the grayness of this album cover, the overall bleak feel of the songs, there is an attempt to bring some color into these lyrics. At one part, he goes, "All the laughter is just making me sad. The stars have turned cherry red. I'm strumming on my gay guitar, smoking a cheap cigar." So there's some playful mixed in within the dreariness. Perhaps what's going on with the song, perhaps the reason why it feels like sad, bluesy ballad and colorful, whimsical at the same time, is that Bob Dylan is thinking about this lost love, but he's almost thinking about like going into a time machine and rediscovering those moments. So having magic along with this melancholy nostalgia. Another part goes, "When the last rays of daylight go down, buddy, you're old no more. I can hear the church bells ringing in the yard. I wonder who they're ringing for. I know I can't win, but my heart just won't give in." Track number 4 is called Million Miles. This is more of a relaxing groove than the melancholy track we just got. It also has some silliness in it, which is a common feature of a lot of blues. In this case, it goes, "The last thing you said before you hit the street, gonna find me a janitor to sweep me off my feet." Track number 5 is called Trying to Get to Heaven. So this is a song about journeying across the US in search of a happiness that he can never quite find, and eventually saying, well, maybe I'll just keep rambling and rambling on until I die. Bob Dylan has certainly written songs about being a rambling train hopper over the years, but unlike those other hobo songs, this doesn't feel like an exercise in him putting on a costume or imitating a style. No, he's actually telling a story with this one. The brilliance of young Bob Dylan was his ability to come across with individually awe-inspiring lines. There was an interview he did in the 90s where he talked about how he couldn't imagine how he ever wrote "It's All Right, Mom, Only Bleeding." The lines he writes in songs like this, individually, they're simple, but they come together to create these complete, whole, almost stories of songs. So this is an example of great composition work on Dylan's part. It's just not fun the way some of his younger songs were, and it's also not pretentious in-your-face imagery the way some of the young songs were. No, these songs are nice, solid, holistic pieces of storytelling. Track number 6 is called Till I Fell in Love with You. Continues the themes of failed love and rambling around. The impression I'm getting with this album is he'll do like a serious ballad, which really makes you feel something over the themes. And then he'll do a lighter blues jam with sort of similar themes. We've more or less had that patterns with tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Track number 7 is called It's Not Dark Yet. So look, this album is somewhat depressing. And as I said, it feels like Bob Dylan's albums have been that way for a while. But unlike the minimalist bleakness of some of the depressing songs we got on some of the other recent albums, this song is at least rich. The production is kind of cinematic. There's an oomph in the drums. And there's also a self-awareness in the lyrics. He goes, well, my sense of humanity has gone down the drain. Behind every beautiful thing, there's some kind of pain. She wrote me a letter, and she wrote it so kind. She put down in writing, that was in her mind. I just don't see why I should even care. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. Another thing I like with this song is even as Bob Dylan is singing these bleak lyrics, he's also being a bit theatrical. He puts on this silly rural accent where he says, it's not dark yet, but it's getting there. Track number 8 is called Cold Iron Bound. It's another song that painfully remembers a past love, and it kind of recasts it into a context of like Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues. Track number 9 is Make You Feel My Love. This is Dylan channeling the loneliness and regret from all the songs into something a bit more catchy, a bit more poppier, though still very melancholy. And Adele famously covered this song, so I guess this is the bridge between Bob Dylan and Adele, and a lot of people apparently have. Neil Diamond has as well. Track number 10 is called Can't Wait. Another kind of grim, but not too humorless about its grimness. And finally, we get track 11, The Highlands, which is over 16 minutes long and was the longest song Bob Dylan had written until 2020, I think it is, when he comes out with Murder Most Foul. So yeah, a really long song. And it brings back a bit the I wish I lived in the country idealism he had on his 1970 album, New Morning. But whereas on that album, it felt like he really believed he could reinvent himself with a country persona, here it's just sort of a loose idea, mostly saying he's just cynical about his day-to-day life. Things are crowded, he's unhappy, he doesn't get along with anyone. And then he gets into a conversation he has with a waitress, which could be a parody of the kind of conversations musicians get asked in interviews when he's talks about things like, you're an artist, you must be able to create great art at once, or you don't read any women authors, do you? And it's like, yes, I do. Or it could just be a cynical take on human conversation in general. So there are certainly some very well-written tracks on here, things bringing back some of the writing techniques, shifting between moments in time we saw in Blood on the Tracks. So Highlands is a great example, along with Standing in the Doorway, Lovesick, and Trying to Get to Heaven, all potential Dylan classics. But at the same time, it's hard to hear the individuality in them because they're all slow and they're all melancholy, and there's not really a happy track to contrast them against. The only track to contrast them against is the poppy lullaby, but still very melancholy, Make You Feel My Love. And I guess for whatever reason, this is just how Bob Dylan's mind was inclined at this point in his career. Supposedly, when Daniel Lanois was talking with him about producing the song Standing in the Doorway, Daniel Lanois said he wanted to make a song like Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. And you can hear it a bit in there. But Sad-Eyed Lady of Lowlands, despite being slow and wistful, is ultimately a happy song. It's Bob Dylan, I'm pretty sure, celebrating his love for his then wife, Sarah. And the fact that none of these songs are able to glitter with happiness, it just means the melancholy comes to be a bit too much of a weight. So good album, possibly even a brilliant album, but you definitely have to be in the right mood to listen to it. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.